I learned at 21 years old that the problem in our culture is not necessarily evil men who do evil things. I realized that the problem was Christians at institutions who educate the next generation of pastors and Christian leaders and ambassadors for Christ. Christ, the greatest former fetus to have ever existed. I realized that the problem is in the walls of the church, that we can't get these issues right in the family of faith. We can't even agree on whether Mary would have had a right to slaughter the Savior in the womb or not. And now you're charging people $55,000 to educate their children to go be ambassadors for Christ? How pathetic is that? Some of the things I'm about to tell you guys, if you're listening to me in Chat Talk right now, are things that you have never heard before.
Hey guys, welcome to the program. I'm so excited today. I am going to just I'm going to combust with this conversation. I'm so excited to bring this conversation to you guys. This is going to be a fun one. In the meantime, if you're watching us on Rumble or YouTube or wherever you may be, make sure that you hit the like button and tell your friends and family about the show. Go to a podcaster offered. Leave us a 5-star rating because that's absolutely what we deserve. And, of course, a review. I don't care what you say in the review. Just say something. Just say something, okay? And make sure that you're checking out my daily hot takes from a hot head where we're hitting the news headlines for about 10 minutes. And pick up on those. I think you're going to enjoy them because it gives me the opportunity therapeutically to get off the rails. Okay, so I got to tell you guys a story. First of all, before I do that, I want to introduce my guest. He's got an incredible book out, and he's got a new film called The 1916 Project. His name is Seth Gruber, and I'm welcoming him to the show. Seth, thank you for joining me. How are you, brother?
Hot takes with a hot head. That's one of the coolest things I've ever heard. Thank you for having me on, Jeff.
I was literally sitting there this morning, and I go, I need to call these little clips something. And I said, I think I'm going to call it hot takes. I said, well, that's been done. Just hot takes from a hot head. So hence where we are. It gives me an excuse to scream at the world. So here, I told you, I promised a funny story, and this is somewhat humiliating for me because, well, you'll see as I tell the story, Seth, but you'll appreciate this. So I flew into Memphis, Tennessee last week. I jumped in a rental car. Rental car companies are the bane of my existence. I hate to deal with them.
Amen.
But I got in a car and I had to drive up to Paragould, Arkansas, which is the middle of the cotton fields, nowhere, and go do a show with a group of people. It was a good time. But I'm driving, and I didn't have the Sirius XM or whatever. So I get over on AM radio, and I'm cruising, trying to find talk radio. And then I get on FM, I'm trying to find talk radio. And I get on this faith-based Christian station. And so I'm listening to this interview. And in the middle of the interview, I'm like paying attention to these two guys talking. And this guy is talking about the Rutherford Institute. He's talking about the Long Walk. He's talking about the Long March. And he's talking about, communism and socialism and Marxism and the abortion industry in America. And I'm like, this dude is killing it. I'm like, this is just a great conversation. Who am I listening to? And it went to a commercial break, and I was like, okay, it's going to come back from a commercial break, and surely they'll say the guy's name. So I'm sitting there at a hotel parking lot at this point in time, and I'm literally, I have not gotten out. I'm sitting in the hotel parking lot waiting for the show to come on because I wanted to hear the rest of this interview. And so I've got my notepad on my iPhone there, and I'm ready to type in the name. I'm literally taking notes from the show that I'm listening to, and he comes back and he goes, we're here with Seth Gruber. And I go, holy crap, that's Seth Gruber. He's coming on the show next week. I was like a little kid that got excited. I immediately downloaded your book. I got the digital copy of the 1916 Project.
Yeah.
And so I was giddy with excitement because, dude, you say things that are so eloquent and so on point in terms of what we're dealing with as a society here in America, and how the Marxists have really driven us into a place where we're almost at a point of no return. So I want to say, first of all, thank you for saying what you say, and I want you to say some more of it today with me, because I'm going to sit over here and kind of get no homo turned on a little bit, all right?
Well, Chad, I told you off the air, I said, I think we have more mutual friends than Hunter Biden has hidden Coke stashes or whatever he's recently injecting into his body. And so I when my team said that, they're like, we got you on Chad's show, I was all giddy. And I was like, I want to do something with Chad. That guy's such a baller. I love what you have done for the culture, your moral and political clarity, and frankly, your unapologetic take the gloves off approach to our theater of the absurd that we're living through right now in 2024. And you're right. It does feel like we're at a Rubicon line. And I'm here to simply suggest that it's because of a weak, impotent, flatulent, disengaged, cowardly church who cared more about her 501c3 status and getting retweeted by the White House and getting an invitation by Klaus Schwab to the World Economic Forum than they do about establishing righteousness in the public square and standing for the cause of the voiceless, the defenseless, and the vulnerable. And nowhere is that more clear than the issue of abortion. So those who murder the unborn cannot be trusted to govern the born, and those who murder the unborn will one day murder you too. There's a lot of insanity happening in the culture and in the country right now. And it's important to have people fighting on the front lines of their respective battlefields. And so I'm not asking for everyone to leave whatever calling God has really positioned them at to come join me in ending abortion. But what I'm saying is it's all connected, and you actually can't deal with the insanity of our culture without dealing with the totalities of the worldviews that have ushered in this upside down, pornographic, obscene, kooky, stupid, Marxist, demonic culture that was architected very carefully for many, 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 many decades by revolutionaries on the left who were more zealous for their religious paganism than most Christians were zealous for pure and undefiled religion. And so that's why I did the book and the film, The 1916 Project, not just to tell the history of Planned Parenthood and the abortion movement in America, but to expose the other sewers that it has fed into and the other sewers that it has fed. It's sort of all connected, and you notice this all the time when a radical leftist starts. But for example, Planned Parenthood, they were all in bed with BLM Incorporated, right? Defund the police, burn down courthouses, and you're like, wait a second, I thought you were the abortion organization. I could give about 15 other examples, but it's like, that's right, wake up, church, wake up, patriots, wake up, conservatives. For the left, they don't deal in bits and pieces. They don't say, I'm going to stay in my little abortion lane. No, they're like, no, we're going to expand into everything. We want the whole federal government. We want the whole culture. Planned Parenthood is the second largest provider of trans drugs for teens, Chad.
Really?
Are they staying in their abortion lane? No, of course not. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now. But that's why knowing history and knowing how we got here is so important, because for the radical left, it's all connected.
Yeah. You, let me just say as an aside, the thing that I love about you and the way you communicate, it's similar to me. You're an adequate user of adverbs and adjectives, and the descriptive language throws in a creative form of fast talking shtick, which I think stimulates people's minds, and I think that's what has made me successful as a person who has consistently put his foot in his mouth over the years. It's an eloquent genius. It really is. Tucker Carlson once said about me, I don't mind patting myself on the back, he said, "You are supernaturally eloquent." And I said, I could say the same thing about Seth Gruber. Let's get into this topic because and not to confuse people, it's the 1916 Project, not the 1619 Project. That's a whole other deal, which again is genius. And I love the byline, the subtitle, the Lion, the Witch, and the where we are, right? Let me get
the war we're in.
The war we're in. The war we're in. The Lion, L-Y-I-N, the Lion, the Witch, and the war we're in. And of course, the witch is Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. And, I read the book. I was on that trip. I was there for 2 days. I read your book in 2 days. And wow. I devoured the thing. You talked about a story in there early on in the book where you said that when you were in college, you didn't ask for permission because you were getting turned down. You went to a Christian college. I did as well. And they did not.
You? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did. So I went to a couple of colleges. I'm way overeducated for what I do. But when I was in cemetery, when I was there, you had set up a big display talking about this abortion issue. I'm a single issue voter. I'm an anti-abortion guy. When I was at the University of Georgia, I was consistently writing articles for the red and black college campus newspaper, consistently fighting for life. That was 30 years ago. It was a major issue then. The people hated me there because I was about the only lone Christian
You look good for 40.
You know what? Let's get him back on the show. Let's go ahead and reschedule Seth.
You were a 10-year-old college student.
No, I'm telling you. So I'm 51, almost 52. It was 30 years ago. I was there, 19, 20 years old. I was writing these articles on the issue of life, and particularly the sacrificing of unborn babies to Moloch.
That's right.
And they hated me there, and that's okay. I like being hated for that. What you did rang my bell in such a powerful way, because you talked about saying, the college president or the administrator came to you and said, you can't, we're not going to let you do this. And you said, well, we're going to do it anyway. Tell me that story.
Yeah. I don't get asked that as much. And maybe it's because some podcast hosts don't read my whole book. So I'm very encouraged. I'm very humbled that you read the whole thing, Chad. That means a lot to me. I was 21. I had luscious long locks down to my collarbone. And I decided after 3 years of being told no by the administration to bring an outside organization in to do a professional display, that I was going to do it anyways. And I was going to create my own signs and hold them. And it was first trimester mutilated aborted baby photos, Chad. So this is Westmont College in Santa Barbara. It's right down the street from Oprah's house. And by the way, I think the spirit of Oprah has far more of an impact on discipling the young minds of the Christian students at that Christian college in Santa Barbara than the Holy Spirit ever has. But anyways, that's a story for another time. And I stood outside of the dining commons and I showed the students and the campus what our theological and administrative betters at that Christian college apparently believe that the Bible doesn't speak to. And how can I say that? Because this Christian college, Chad, takes no position on abortion, no position in their student handbook. Now they take a position on on same-sex marriage, on, that God it's just marriage, it's just man and woman. If you're sleeping around on the college campus, you can be expelled because it's a Christian college. So they have a sexual ethic code and all this stuff. But I guess if a baby gets conceived from, a non-marital sexual union between two college students, then the college has no position on what to do with that thing, that human, that child, that image bearer of God. And plus, there were pro-abortion professors on faculty there, Chad, and there still are, actually. And so I was a real pain in the rear, stick in the eye, fly in the ointment. And they came out and they said, did you get permission to do this? And I said, no. And they said, we're going to have to ask you to stop. And I said, no. I said, I read through your student handbook, and I only need permission for club events. So I didn't ask my club to stand with me. I'm here as a tuition-paying student exercising my right to free speech. And basically, Chad, they went, bleep. And after 3 hours of debating them, Chad, and I was wearing a GoPro, so I actually have all the footage from this conversation.
Wow.
And they said, we feel like you're disrespecting us, but you're not breaking any rules. And I said, I feel like you're disrespecting the murdered unborn babies in Santa Barbara, whose Christian parents are probably killing them at a greater number here at your Christian college than anywhere else in this city. You're a disgrace to the name of Christ, to the name of Christianity, whose Savior entered human history in a uterus to redeem mankind from their sins. Oh, and by the way, because you hire pro-abortion faculty professors at a Christian college whose motto is Christ preeminent in all things, they're committing a Christological heresy by being pro-choice, because that would mean that Christ was at some point fully God but not fully human, in violation of the doctrine of the incarnation. And they said, humana, humana, humana. So Christianity Today covered it at the time, LifeSite News, a bunch of pro-life conservative blogs and news sites at the time. And the reason I tell you that story, Chad, is this. I learned at 21 years old that the problem in our culture is not necessarily evil men who do evil things. By the way, the world is in greater peril from those who tolerate and encourage evil than from those who actually commit it. I realized that the problem was Christians at institutions who educate the next generation of pastors and Christian leaders and ambassadors for Christ. Christ, the greatest former fetus to have ever existed. These educators who do more to raise up a generation of progressive activists with a little bit of Christianese sprinkled onto it than they do to stand for the full counsel of God, to raise up the next generation to be salt and light for Jesus, to establish righteousness with the understanding that when the church doesn't stand against wickedness and establish truth in the public square, no one else will, and we'll descend back into despotism and you'll lose the country as you know it forever. I realize that the problem is in the walls of the church, that we can't get these issues right in the family of faith We can't even agree on whether Mary would have had a right to slaughter the Savior in the womb or not. And now you're charging people $55,000 to educate their children to go be ambassadors for Christ. How pathetic is that? So I've taken that lesson with me today at the White Rose Resistance, which is the fastest growing pro-life organization in America, and we're the ones that did the 1916 Project, that the problem is the church. We are weak, we are silent, we don't speak where we should speak, and we speak falsehoods where we should speak truthhoods. We care more about our 501c3 status and the spell of the Johnson Amendment from LBJ when he was a senator. He used that to silence Christians that he didn't like speaking out against him. So he said, oh, it's all political, and so if you get political, I'm going to take your tax-exempt status. An anti-Christian, anti-God, pagan heretic who hated Christians. That's where the Johnson Amendment comes from. Most churches care more about that than they do the adventure of Christendom and following the Lion of the tribe of Judah wherever he's taking you to fight against evil. That's a fun adventure. That's what we're doing at the White Rose Resistance. And these churches and Christian colleges need to be exposed for raising up a generation of neo-pagan revivalists with a little bit of Christian language snuck into their paganism. So that's why I told the story, because we're facing that problem today in the church.
Hey guys, I'm always wheeling and dealing for you. Just got off the phone with my buddy Trey over at United Patriot Coin. I got a special offer. Got a special offer just for you. Buy 4 ounces of silver, get your 5th ounce for free. Now, with the economy on the brink and a volatile election season ahead, the price of silver is predicted to soar to levels not seen in over a decade. So it could be the perfect time for you to start or add to your silver stack. I want you to do it. According to a recent report by the Silver Institute, global demand for silver is projected to hit 1.2 billion ounces by the end of the year, making it the second highest level on record. So when the demand rises, the prices tend to go right along with it. So I want you to act now, take advantage of this potential price surge. You don't want to miss out on this one, folks. Build your silver holdings before the price jump and ride the wave as the market goes up. Take advantage of this limited time offer for a free ounce of silver when you buy 4 silver rounds at the regular price. Visit UnitedPatriotCoin.com. Check out the different designs. Call them when you're ready to place your order. Make sure to mention me or vault code CHAD5. When you call. The site is UnitedPatriotCoin.com, or you can skip that step and just call them up. Call Trey like I did. 844-202-7834. Find out what designs they have this week. 844-202-7834. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the White Rose Resistance, because after getting associated with you and just acclimated to the stuff that you're saying and doing in your projects with the book and the film, which we're going to talk about the film in a little bit, you have my full-throated, wholehearted endorsement, my support. I'll throw everything I've got, the full weight of every platform I've got behind what you guys are doing. It's so important, and you're doing it right. This is the brand of Christianity that I think men in particular are starving for.
Yes.
In this country, because I'm at a point now where I say, screw the 501c3 status.
Come on.
We'll pay taxes if that's what has to happen, or we'll we'll disincorporate or whatever has to happen, because let's face it, even the people that are on social media platforms that are, quote, pastors, preachers, spiritual leaders, and this is not a blanket statement for all of them. Some of them are doing a good job. But so many of them that we're holding up on a pedestal right now and say, wow, listen to what they're saying. They're really being forceful, powerful, and truthful, are really just being forceful, powerful, and truthful with psychological psychobabble that's getting into your inner feelings rather than preaching the gospel of Christ, death, burial, and resurrection, and the demands of repentance and turning from wicked ways and things like that. So this is wholehearted, full counsel of God truth that you're spouting and putting out there, and it starts right there in the womb. And I love what you say, a former fetus. That's Jesus is a former fetus. He came from the uterus. The Word became flesh. The Word became flesh. That encounter between Mary and Elizabeth and John the Baptist in Mary's womb, the quickening, or in Elizabeth's womb, the quickening where the baby jumped, and I use that phrase all the time. When I get excited, I say, my baby just jumped. And that's right. It's so, do you know the Greek behind that, Chad? Do you know the Greek behind it's so powerful. I've said this on pulpits and stages, platforms, but I don't know if I've said this on someone's show for a long time, but the Lord just used you to bring it back to mind. So in Luke 1,
Okay, it says, by the way, the overturning of Roe versus Wade, Chad, on June 24th, 2022. June 24th in the church calendar for thousands of years is the nativity of St. John the Baptist. It's when the church celebrates Mary going to visit her cousin Elizabeth. And when she visits her cousin Elizabeth, the prenatal John the Baptist starts doing backflips in the uterus because he recognizes his prenatal deity, second member of the Trinity, God-man who entered human history in a uterus to redeem mankind from their sins. And so because God knits life together in the womb, Psalm 139, but that is God in the womb, incarnation, Jesus is not fully God and fully human from the moment of birth. He's fully God and fully human from the moment of conception. Follow the science. So that is the creator of the universe in Mary's womb. So that means that the second member of the Trinity is in a uterus knitting the prenatal John the Baptist together in the womb, who's also in a uterus in the same room because their moms are having tea, sipping back and celebrating what God's doing in their individual uteruses, which means the second member of the Trinity, prenatal deity, God-man, is knitting himself together in a womb of a woman whose uterus he once knit together when he knit together Mary in the womb of Mary's mother. So that's what's happening right there, that passage you just brought up. June 24th is when we celebrate that moment. It's called the Nativity of St. John the Baptist. When did Roe versus Wade get overturned? On the Nativity of St. John the Baptist. So it got overturned on the day in the church calendar when Christians celebrate two unborn babies, one of whom is God. And this is why, Chad, I want you at the last stand on June 1st in Southern California in San Diego. It's a 3-day event. It ends on June 1st because we're taking back June. June is not Pride Month. It's Life Month. It's not Legion Month. It's Life Month. And I want all of your listeners to join us in San Diego. You go to thelaststand.com. I'm going to book you there today if your schedule allows. Thelaststand.com. And then we're going to send churches to do life marches all around America because this is the church's job. Anyway, so besides taking back June in next year, the Greek in that passage is beautiful. When it says that the baby leaped in Elizabeth's womb, the Greek word is berephos, B-R-E-P-H-O-S. So it says berephos leaped in Elizabeth's womb. You turn to Luke 2, Chad, one chapter later. Jesus is now born. So he's not a fetus. By the way, fetus is Latin word for offspring or small child. So listeners of the Chad Show, when they tell you it's not a baby, it's a fetus, you can say, you're right, it is an offspring and it is a small child. Good technical use of the Latin language there, you weird leftist. Anyways, and so now Jesus is an infant. He's outside of the uterus, okay? And it says, Mary laid berephos Jesus in the manger. Mary laid baby Jesus in the manger. It's the same Greek word to refer to unborn babies as it is used to refer to born babies, because our Savior sees no distinction between the value, dignity, and right to life between children in the womb and children outside the womb. Isn't that beautiful?
I love it. That's amazing. You know, I've always told people, I said, you know, if you want to get into the scripture, you know, so many people want to deny it on the face value. I said, you dig into it. It's as deep as you want to go. And it will blow your mind, the connections that are there. You talk about Margaret Sanger, and you without shame call her a witch. I agree. I think it is the essence of paganism. I think the barbarity of abortion, let's call it what it is, it's the murder of unborn babies when they bring a mobile unit outside the Democrat National Convention and they're going to abort babies out on the street. And we went from safe, legal, and rare to shout your abortion and taking a plan
really quickly.
Really fast, dude. And this has become, talking about single issue voters, this has become on the Harris Walls ticket, this has become their single issue. All they can talk about is, quote, women's reproductive rights, which again is your right in the name of convenience to murder your unborn baby.
Did you see that clip from the Kamala Harris event the other day, Jeff?
Unreal, man.
She's talking about abortion. She's talking about how Trump, by the way, I'm voting for Trump, but like I've been blasting him as well to tell him to like stop your pro-choice rhetoric. Stop it.
Same.
Get back in line with your pro-life promises. So, but anyways, so she's there, bro, going like, Trump, these are Trump abortion bans. You know, he said he was going to overturn Roe and then he did it. So she's talking about abortion and why it's so important to kill babies in the name of radical feminism. And then someone yells out, Jesus is king.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, you're at the wrong rally. And bro, in that moment, I said, there it is. How quickly she goes from celebrating the murder of babies to blaspheming the name of Christ, the greatest former fetus who has ever existed. That tells you everything you need to know about today's Democrat Party, but I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. I found it fascinating in that just last week I was praying and I said, you know, how many times have we seen Donald Trump allow people to pray for him, lay hands on him, groups of pastors, citizens, even a woman at McDonald's grabbed his hand and prayed for him. He allows that to happen. And I've never looked at my 17-year-old son and said, I want you to grow up and be like Donald Trump. That's not, you know.
Sure.
When you ask Donald Trump what's your favorite Bible verse, and he's like, I like them all. I like them all. They're fantastic. You know,
I like all of them.
I love him. They're fabulous. I love the Lord. He's fabulous too. He's got great hair. But I'm like, that stuff kind of frustrates all of us. But again, it is what it is. I've never seen Barack Obama or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris say, yes, I want people praying for me. I've never seen them give credit to God. I've never seen them acknowledge the Lord's sovereignty in any way. And when that happened, I said, this should be a line in the sand for anyone that claims the name of Christ. I don't care even if you're off in Latter-day Saints world or Jehovah's Witness world, or whether you're Catholic or Protestant. If you have any affinity towards the name of Jesus Christ, where it is to be revered, and she says that's the rally down the street, that should be the line in the sand for you, because it says everything about their opinion. You would think. But
and
again,
yet we got evangelicals for Harris right now. And by the way, it's the same folks who are behind evangelicals for Biden. In 2019 and then into 2020 with that election. And this is what I'm talking about, bro. When I was at Westmont College, Chad, again, let me just say this because you have such an incredible listener base. Do not send your children to Westmont College. Okay, if you're an alum, Chad, I get people it's a little Christian college in Santa Barbara, but people come up to me all the time at events saying that they graduated from there, or one of their kids or niece or nephews is there. It's a very popular college. It's one of the most expensive in the country. Do not give any gifts to that college if you've graduated from there, and tell them, because I know what Seth has told me about your college, and until you take a pro-life position and fire your pro-abortion faculty professors, you're not getting my dollars. I looked at a study that the political science department did at my alma mater while I was there, and they found that 60% of the faculty members, so these are not people who clean the toilets, right, or serve in the luncheon. This is like professors who are teaching the young Christian minds. Over 60% of the faculty at Westmont College had voted for Obama both terms. Wow. The most pro-abortion president in American political history before Biden, who's made Obama almost look like a pragmatic pro-choice moderate, is how pro-abortion this current administration is. And that there we are, right back to the problem again. That Christians need to begin leaving churches and refusing to tithe at churches, who forget the United Methodist, Episcopalian, pro-abortion denominations. I'm talking about churches that probably preach through the Bible, but they never bring it into conflict with what's happening in this country. We need pastors and believers who are going to raise up bold Christian men, not nice Christian men, kind, godly, spirit-filled men, okay? There's no commandment that says be nice, Chad. That's not in the Bible.
That's right.
Okay? Who are going to be the sons of Issachar, in First Chronicles, the men who understood the times they lived in. So they knew what Israel ought to do. We need men and women who know what time it is. They understand the times we live in. So they know what the people of God ought to do. That we need to be about our Father's high kingdom business. And I think nowhere do we see God's heart for a lot of these issues that are now becoming so normalized in the 21st century, Chad, than in the Old Testament. That you find some of God's most colorful language about the killing of babies in the Old Testament. He would say things like, "It never entered my mind that you would do this, pass your children through the fire to Baal." He would say, if you do that, or if the rest of you kind of close your eyes and pretend to not see, when that dad over there cooks his kid on Moloch's hand and you close your eyes, he says, "I'll cut you off from the people. I'll cut you off, you and the rest of you who follow after those people in prostituting yourselves after Moloch." In Judges 6, Gideon's in a cave hiding out like a pansy while they have Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism, and the Midianites are robbing the Israelites in broad daylight, and they take whatever the Israelites produce. So Gideon's producing his own wheat up in a foothill mountain cave, and the angel of the Lord appears to Gideon, and he says, "Walk out of the cave and go tear down the Asherah poles and the Baal statues." And this was before Gideon's army. This was before God slayed the Midianites. And what does God prove are his highest political and spiritual priorities to him in the midst of a season where his people are being ruled by and governed by people who hate them? Sex cults and child sacrifice. Asherah was goddess of sex, and they would worship her through orgies and temple prostitutes. But when you live like that, 9 months later, you've got a problem. So that's okay. Pass it through the fire to Baal. Baby sacrifice. As it was in Judges 6, so it is today, Chad. What are the two pagan gods of American culture today, if not the same ones? Weird sex cults and child sacrifice. Yeah. In Judges 6, God does not say, "I don't like your border policy or your tax rate." Now, I'm a conservative, and it's a mess at the border. And by the way, it's expanding child trafficking and abortion trafficking. I'm on board with building the wall. Don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is, what does God focus in on in the midst of cultural and political insanity when his special chosen people are being oppressed and robbed in broad daylight by the Midianites? Stop killing the babies and stop the orgies and the sex cult religion. Tear those down to the ground, and then we'll talk.
Yeah. And if you read those passages, and you read, for instance, Romans 1, the exchanging of natural desires and the elevation of animals, I mean, the people lost their minds over, Christy, I'm talking about shooting a dog on the ranch. There's always this thing where people, they flip their desires become very unnatural. And so they elevate. I mean, if you talk about aborting puppies or killing puppies, then people lose their freaking mind. But you talk about dismembering babies in the womb. Exactly.
Remember that? They lost their minds. Dude.
People went crazy. I mean, you could inoculate kids with some untested poison and give people blood clots and make everybody one big mass experimental medical procedure, and it was great. But you put beagles in a bag,
flies are
eating their face, and people lose their freaking mind.
They were calling for his resignation. G.K. Chesterton, Chad. G.K. Chesterton is known as many things, but he was one of the foremost vocal public Christian voices against the eugenics movement.
Wow. Let's talk about that.
Guess what he said? He said, wherever there is animal worship, there will be human sacrifice.
That's amazing. And let me tell you something. If anybody has never spent time studying, reading, researching G.K. Chesterton, please sit there and devour it, meditate on it. Amazing.
Unreal thinker. Yep.
Just incredible. And I love Chesterton. And you're right. He said that. And here we go. 1916 was a pivotal year in this eugenics movement. First of all, let's talk about, and I want you to do it, talk about what eugenics is and what's the significance of 1916 in the United States.
Thank you, Chad. Dude, next time I got to sit there next to you. We got to open up that bottle of bourbon. I can't read it right there.
Come on. What do we got?
I'll bring the cigars, Chad, okay?
We got horse soldiers back there signed by the actual horse soldiers from the guys who were there in Afghanistan. So we'll make sure we got the good stuff back here.
We're having such a good time. I'm like, why am I not there with a bunch of cigars for you? So to answer your question, I have here something very interesting, Chad. I thought I'd show this to you. It's a study by Thomas Cargill, professor of economics in the Department of Economics at the University of Nevada at Reno. It's called Eugenics in High School History, a failure to confront the past. And what he did here was he looked at the 9 most commonly used history high school textbooks in public schools in America. All nine of the most commonly used history high school textbooks in public schools have zero or almost no mention of a woman named Margaret Sanger, of the eugenics movement, of Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood's role in the eugenics movement, and basically no mention of a Supreme Court decision called Buck versus Bell. In 1927, our United States Supreme Court, in an 8-1 decision, said that the state could forcibly sterilize Americans that the elites determined were a threat to the gene pool. The Chief Justice who authored the decision summed up the case and said 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. In the next 10 years, over 70,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized by state governments in the land of the free and the home of the brave, Chad. Let me not beat around the bush here for your listeners. That means strapping people's arms and ankles down to a table, tying the woman's tubes, or snipping the dude so that they can no longer reproduce. That's what forcible sterilizations means, okay? Now, if there was any mention of those things that I just said in these 9 most commonly used history high school textbooks, they were a passing reference, and they didn't actually teach about that. Now, is Dred Scott v. Sanford taught in American public high school textbooks? The slavery decision. Oh, yeah. Because that allows the weirdos at the New York Times and the 1619 Project to label America horribly racist and irredeemable. What about a Supreme Court decision that strapped people down to tables?
Wow.
And said, you don't get to reproduce because, us white elites, we get to determine who gets to have children and who doesn't. Okay, now, ever heard of the Nuremberg trials? Okay, well, if you're a listener to this show, you probably have. Yeah, when we decided to hang a bunch of Nazis for their crimes against humanity. At the Nuremberg trials, the Nazis cited our Supreme Court decision, Buck versus Bell, in their defense.
Wow.
Chad, as if to say, who are you Americans to judge us, huh? You were doing eugenics before us. So that's an example of eugenics. Now, what does it mean? The root word for eugenics means good in birth. Good in birth? That's right. So that means some people are not good in birth. And so the white elites get to determine what are the characteristics, right? What are those traits that like we want more of? And what are those ones that like we don't want any more of in the gene pool? And whatever those ones are, if you've got those, you don't get to have kids. Okay, wow. So that's like eugenics. Okay, well, guess what? Margaret Sanger, when she flees New York City in 1914, because she had spread some of her obscene, pornographic, illegal pamphlets to New York City homes, and it got her in trouble with the anti-obscenity laws of the day. They were called the Comstock laws. By the way, we still have anti-obscenity laws on the books, Chad. They're just not enforced anymore. Right. It's very, very tragic. And so rather than get arrested, guess what Sanger does? She ships her kids off to be raised by her friends. She gets her socialist friends in the New York labor movement to forge her a passport, and she flees to England to escape the law. Yeah, that's the beginning of Planned Parenthood, guys. That's the founder. Anyways, she spends 18 months in England, and she becomes the first Kamala Harris. She sleeps her way up the levers of power. That's how she gets her origin story. And she jumps in bed with H.G. Wells, who wrote War of the Worlds. She has an affair with a man named Havelock Ellis, who was sort of the Alfred Kinsey of England, Chad. A sexually impotent revolutionary who wrote over 100 books on every weird form of sexually titillating experiments. He hosted orgies in his home and would force his wife to watch him. So that's Havelock Ellis. He begins an affair with Margaret Sanger, Chad. He becomes a guest writer for her magazine when she comes back to New York City and starts the Birth Control Review, which was Planned Parenthood's publication and magazine, which would later carry articles from members of the Third Reich. So Havelock Ellis is referred to by Sanger as her number one political and sexual mentor. I mean, they remain pen pals for the rest of their life until his death. Okay, this is Sanger's most influential mentor. So if you guys want to start understanding the history of the sexual revolution, the history of Planned Parenthood, how did abortion come to America, I'm telling you that this man is the most formative individual in the life of the founder of Planned Parenthood. Now, I'm about to answer your question and blow your freaking mind, except not because you've already read my book. Who was Havelock Ellis mentored by? Francis Galton. They were pen pals. Galton took Havelock Ellis on as a protege. Who was Francis Galton? The guy who coined the term eugenics.
Wow.
That's where the word comes from. He's the modern father of the eugenics movement, who was so impacted by his cousin's book, Origin of Species, and his cousin's second book, The Descent of Man, written by Charles Darwin. So we went from Darwinism, man is an animal, to his cousin, eugenics, obliterate the unfit, to Havelock Ellis, sexual chaos, orgy hosting, sexual revolutionary, father of the free love movement, to the founder of Planned Parenthood and child sacrifice awfully quickly, didn't we? Ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims. That's just a little bit about eugenics. And if your listeners are thinking of Pol Pot, Mussolini, Mao Zedong, and Adolf Hitler and Stalin, good job. That's also all eugenics. Between the year 1900 and the year 2000, over more innocent human beings were slaughtered by their state governments thanks to the ideology of eugenics than all of the individuals murdered before the year 1900 in world history combined.
Man, people don't know. And you go back to Darwin's, the subtitle of Darwin's Origin of the Species, the preservation of the favored races for,
Very good, Chad.
That in and of itself should tell you everything. But they like so many of their things, they like to leave those little tidbits out.
Yeah,
those
which is why they canceled
editings.
Sanger in July of 2020. It's the same reason.
And we'll talk about that in a second, because that's a fascinating deal. And the connections are weird. I mean, we don't even need to get into Gramsci and Pete Buttigieg's
We
father,
can if you'd like.
I mean, who's what translated the 3 volumes. You know what? Let's talk about that. Most people don't
You're a
even know
sharp guy, Chad.
They don't, dude.
Where's the bourbon? Come on.
The cowboy hat fools people. I'm telling you, I wear the cowboy hat to throw people off.
I knew you were smart, but you're blowing me away with how much you know. I'm very
Let me
impressed.
tell you, let's talk about Gramsci for a second, okay? Let's talk about some Marxists. Because
Sure.
again, this is the foundation that makes this type of philosophy. As you said, ideas have consequences. These are the things that lead to dead babies. These are the things that lead to genocidal maniacs like Adolf Hitler, who actually used Margaret Sanger as an inspiration. And people would always say, no, Margaret Sanger, she wasn't part of the KKK, but she was awfully close to them. She was awfully close to them. She spent a lot of time at rallies running her mouth. No, she wasn't cited by the Nazis. Okay. Well, the Third Reich.
I can get into all of that, but
Yes.
she wrote in her journal, Chad, about how she said, this evening I spoke at the women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan, and I had to reduce some of my ideas to make them more understandable to, basically what she's saying is to these stupid white women who aren't very educated. But she said, I think I was successful in getting across my points. And then she said, a dozen invitations to speak to similar groups were proffered.
Wow.
That's the direct quote from her journal. I memorize all this weird stuff, so you don't have to. So she said in her own journal, Chad, she said, more than a dozen invitations to speak to similar groups were offered to me. Similar to what groups? Similar to the KKK chapter. So it is reasonable to believe that she spoke to multiple overtly racist KKK chapters as part of the agenda of Planned Parenthood. And nowhere is that made more clear than what the founding board member of Planned Parenthood, who was the exalted cyclops of the Massachusetts KKK. But you wanted to talk about Antonio Gramsci.
Let's do that before we go to Gramsci. And I want to remind everybody, because I'm sick of people believing in the fake news, if you will, or the false narratives that are out there. This is a woman who, again, for those of you who are missing out on the fast talk between the two of us, this is the woman who founded Planned Parenthood. Okay.
Yep.
This is the place where when the slut drives past the Planned Parenthood office, her Wi-Fi automatically connects on her cell phone. Okay. These are the people we're talking about. This is horrible stuff. And so these are the places that literally make their billions of dollars off of human sacrifice. But
it's not their fastest growing revenue stream in 2024. Their fastest growing revenue stream is not abortions. It's chemically castrating transgender drugs for America's gender confused youth. So if you're listening to Chad right now and you're like, oh, here we go, the pro-life issue again. Everyone's attacking Trump. I don't like this. Okay, I don't think we should kill babies third trimester. You know, I'm kind of a Carrie Lake, Mitt Romney. Like, maybe can we only kill the first trimester babies? And you're listening to Chad and you're not fully in our camp yet that we need to abolish abortion. Let me just tell you, that maybe you should care about it for other reasons. And we'll get you into the abolish abortion camp later. Don't worry, just stay tuned. Maybe you should care about destroying, defunding, and completely obliterating Planned Parenthood because they're chemically castrating America's gender-confused youth. And they're the second largest provider of those drugs in America. So as we go to like how Sanger was a cultural Marxist, how she was living out the strategy of the robes, which comes from Gramsci and the Frankfurt School, and she probably was more effective at that than anyone else in the 20th century. Like, as we get to that, guys, just understand, we're not just talking about killing babies, as if that's not evil enough to wake up American people and Christians to end. For Planned Parenthood, it's the totality of the revolution that matters. And killing babies plays a major piece of that, but it's part of a bigger puzzle.
Yeah. And you get into the racism aspect of it. Forget the fact that she looked at the black race as being weeds that needed to be plucked, or the fact that 85% of Planned Parenthoods are in walking distance of an urban community, or the black or the Hispanic community has 5 times the abortions of the white community. And they say, oh, well, that's just because of socioeconomic problems. No, it might be because of a philosophical foundation upon which they founded this eugenics organization. But I digress on this deal. So, I mean, that's pretty racist, if you ask me.
Well, I mean, she launched the Negro Project, Chad. And for you guys listening, my film is streaming right now on X. As of October 22nd at 4 p.m. Eastern, it's been streaming on X, formerly known as Twitter. It will be streaming on there for free until just after the election. And we need your help to make it go viral. So what I'm about to tell you about the Negro Project and a KKK board member of Planned Parenthood and all this stuff, help us out. This is an election swinging kind of documentary, but more importantly, it can wake up the sleeping church to adopt our historic bold Christianity to end these kinds of evils in the first place. So the 1916project.com. to host a screening at your church, the 1916project.com to order the book, and the 1916project.com to link you to our Twitter account, our X account, where you can watch this right now and help us get it before Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk. And if those two retweet it on X, we may wake up Black America and destroy this election. We all know the Democrat Party can't win elections without the black vote, Chad. We all know that. And we're watching the Democrat Party losing more of the black vote over the last 8 years, aren't we? If this film goes viral, I'm telling you, Kamala Harris will not become president if our elections are secure. Like, some of the things I'm about to tell you guys as you're listening to me in Chat Talk right now are things that you have never heard before. And I have all the citations, by the way, in the book. If you're like, I doubt that claim is true. Oh, no. I'm a weird homeschool kid who does my research. It's all cited here. So she launched the Negro Project, Chad, in 1939. In 1939. That's not what I called it. That's what she called it. She called it the Negro Project. Here's the opening proposal of the Negro Project. The mass of Negroes, particularly in the South, are still breeding carelessly and disastrously, with the result that the increase among Negroes, even more than among the whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and least fit. End quote. Oh, yikes. That sounds a little bit racist. And then when she defined birth control, here's how she defined it. She said, birth control, Sanger said, is not contraception thoughtlessly practiced. Birth control means the cultivation and release of the better racial elements in our society, and the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks, those human weeds, which threaten the blossoming of the finest flowers of American civilization. End quote. That's how the founder of Planned Parenthood defined birth control, which is a phrase that she coined, Chad. She actually coined the term birth control. And then she launched the Negro Project, and she got Black charismatic social leaders to propagandize birth control in majority Black enclaves, okay, to get on board with what? Not having kids. I just told you what she meant by birth control. So for people, I get attacks, right, Chad? And they say that's not what birth control means. It just means helping plan your parenthood, right? Just controlling that fertility process so you don't end up with 10 kids and you're poor and you can't afford that many kids. So Seth, that's birth control. Stop attributing, fake news motives to saying, I just defined what she called birth control. She said it means the cultivation and release of those better racial elements in our society. Like, that's what she meant by it, okay? And then she hired Negro Project directors. Bro, just like Turning Point USA with my friend Charlie Kirk has field coordinators. Same thing. They hired field coordinators. And here's what a Negro Project director said. And I've got one of these quotes, if not both of them, in the book. I find all the dirty laundry that you can't find on Google in books no longer in publication. And I go, oh, it's right there. Those psycho Keynesian pornographic liberals tried to hide this from Google. And I go find it. That's my job description, Chad. So one of the Negro Project directors said this: there is a great danger that we will fail because the Negroes think that this is a plan for their extermination. So let's appear to let the colored run it. End quote.
Wow.
Wait, what? Meaning that her Negro Project directors on the payroll of Planned Parenthood said, the Black people think that we're trying to exterminate them, so let's put Black faces at the front of it so that they think they run it. And then one other Negro Project director, Chad, said, okay, and I apologize for my language. This is what they said. They said, I wonder if Southern darkies can ever be entrusted with a clinic because our experience causes us to doubt their ability to work, except under white supervision. End quote. Anyways, that's a little bit about the anti-Black racism of Planned Parenthood. And it makes sense because her founding board member, when she founded the American Birth Control League, before it changed its name to Planned Parenthood, in 1921, her founding board member was Lothrop Stoddard. And Lothrop Stoddard was the exalted cyclops of the Massachusetts KKK. His book, The Menace of the Underman, was so well loved by the Nazis that the Third Reich paid to have the German translated version of The Menace of the Underman. And they translated Underman into Untermensch. Untermensch became the title of Heinrich Himmler's famous Nazi propaganda book, Der Untermensch, meaning subhuman, to refer to those that they were exterminating. And he was so well loved by Heinrich Himmler and Joseph Goebbels and Fritz Sauckel and Robert Ley and Adolf Hitler that they invited him to the Third Reich in 1939. Who am I talking about? The founding board member of Planned Parenthood. And he met with all of those men, including Hitler. And Sanger's board member wrote about it in his book, Into the Darkness, Nazi Germany Today. And reading his description of Hitler, it's hard not to blush. Reading his description of Hitler. I mean, he just loved this guy.
Yeah, he loved him.
And so historians believe, Chad, that the founding board member of Planned Parenthood is the only American to have had a one-on-one meeting with Adolf Hitler after he rose to power. Later, Heinrich Himmler said that Stoddard's two books, The Menace of the Underman and The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy, was for Heinrich Himmler the blueprint for the creation of what became the final solution. So in other words, one of Hitler's highest henchmen and architects of the Third Reich said that his blueprint came from the founding board member of Planned Parenthood. So here's the question, guys. Did Sanger kick him off the board for being the exalted cyclops of the Massachusetts KKK? Did he get kicked off the board by Margaret Sanger for meeting with Hitler in 1939 and drooling over him and visiting a eugenics court where he helped influence a eugenics decision in terms of sterilizing who Hitler defined as the unfit? No, he held that position for years.
Wow.
Everyone okay?
Yeah, buddy.
That's a little bit, just a tiny bit of the history of Planned Parenthood.
And so you adequately labeled her a witch. I think that was a solid thing that you did there. And you know, what you just described sounds very similar. If you just put a black face in front of an organization, it sounds very similar to something that was recent, that was a multi-billion-dollar industry, made a lot of people rich, called BLM, that was not for the black people at all.
That's right.
So another topic for another day.
What is BLM stands for by large mansions, I think.
Exactly. In white neighborhoods in California. So that's
and dude, chat, you and I are just on the same spiritual wavelength. I'm so glad you just brought up BLM. There is, because we didn't talk about Antonio Gramsci, so you just kind of arranged the puzzle pieces.
We will.
There's a link between cultural Marxism, Frankfurt School, Antonio Gramsci, and Planned Parenthood over here, with BLM co-founders right in the middle. It's a fascinating story. Ideologically, it's just fascinating how this kind of happened. So Patrice Cullors and Alicia Garza, the co-founders of BLM Incorporated, they were mentored. One of their heroes, one of their mentors, they've spoken openly about this, by the way, is Angela Davis. Angela Davis is an anti-white racist. She's black and she just hates white people. She was doing CRT before CRT became as infamous as it was in 2020, right. Before Robin DiAngelo's book, who Matt Walsh tricked into having an interview with, but before Ibram X. Kendi. Okay, like she was CRT before it was like a buzzword in American politics. And Angela Davis, I think, is in her 80s now. Vile leftist, bitter old woman. Well, guess who Angela Davis was mentored by? Herbert Marcuse, who came straight from the Frankfurt School. Yeah. And Herbert Marcuse was one of the fathers of the free love movement with Wilhelm Reich, which basically just means if it feels good, do it. I mean, like Havelock Ellis Sanger stuff, right? Like Sanger had multiple affairs, right? Sanger, by the way, once said, through sex, mankind may attain a great spiritual illumination, which will transform the world and light up the only path to an earthly paradise. Mm-hmm. So what you have to understand about radical leftists, Chad, which you do understand this, but your audience is that for the left, sex is salvation. Sex is a way for salvation. It's really the only way to achieve an earthly paradise on earth. And so Herbert Marcuse with Wilhelm Reich were fathers of the free love movement in California. Herbert Marcuse once said that the way back into the garden is to take another bite of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so it's funny because like Herbert Marcuse and Sanger are both atheists. They both claim that there is no God, and yet they can't help but use theological religious language to describe their paganism because we're image bearers of God. That's how we operate. We were meant to worship God. And so Herbert Marcuse talked about an idea called enforced coercive toleration. And this eventually led to the canceling of Planned Parenthood by the 1619 Project revolutionaries in BLM. And I'm going to go connect that because it's freaking hilarious. But this is what Sanger did. This is how the left destroyed our culture, Chad. Now, what is enforced coercive toleration? Well, this was almost exposed in the 60s. This was almost exposed to the American people. And what do I mean by exposed? I mean the strategy of radical leftists to change the culture. They used to speak openly about what their strategy was, Chad, and then they realized, like, maybe we need to keep that on the DL. And so in 1966, Carroll Quigley, who was mentors to Bill and Hillary Clinton, shocker, was going to publish his magnum opus called Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time. It was due to be released by Macmillan in 1966. And by the way, he was celebrating what he called a tracing of the Anglo-American establishment. And this is the foundational roots of things like the Trilateral Commission and the Committee for Foreign Relations. But he wanted to create a history of what he called this extraordinary movement. And so he's no conservative, but he was starting to reveal the plan, which he thought was such a great plan, which is to destroy the fruit of Christianity, get rid of all the Judeo-Christian ideas and ideologies that animate our laws and our culture. Let's get rid of that. Let's be unburdened by the past. Let's usher ourselves into a utopian neo-pagan revivalism. But he liked these ideas, right? And he traced the ideas to the ideas of Antonio Gramsci, who went afoul of Mussolini and spent the rest of his life in prison. And in prison, he has his prison letters about some of these strategies, which become the basis for the creation of the Frankfurt School. And the Frankfurt School is where we get critical race theory. It's where we get critical theory. And then, of course, Pete Buttigieg's father, Professor Joseph Buttigieg, translates Gramsci's prison letters into English for American leftists to study and implement in our culture war in America in the 21st century. So the book was due to be released, and the books show up at the warehouse. And then all of a sudden, the members of the Anglo-American establishment, Chad, that he was writing about and tracing their ideas, decided that the book was premature, that it would expose the plan a little bit too early. Chad, they weren't ready for it. And so the books in the warehouse were all destroyed, all of them. Except two cases. This is 1966, which were snuck out by a warehouse worker who thought, wait a second, they brought all these books, they got a huge PR marketing thing planned. Like, wait a second. And so he thought he could make some money by selling them. He sneaks two of them out. My mentor, Dr. George Grant, who's the VIP guest featured in the film, The 1916 Project, has one of those original copies. Now, Chad, there's nothing particularly incendiary about it. It's a straightforward history, actually, of how the cultural Marxists, brother, decided that instead of barricades in the street, instead of burning down Minneapolis and Ferguson, instead of a police-free zone called Chaz Chop in Seattle, a better way to usher in the revolution would be to capture the robes of the clergy, of the universities, of the scientific organizations, of the courts, because then the revolution could happen without guns. They called it the strategy of the robes, which is a phrase that came from Antonio Gramsci. And Quigley traces how this long-term strategy was to unfold in the major institutions of power, and that it would fundamentally alter the foundations of culture. And that's what Gramsci understood, right? That you have to infiltrate all of the most basic institutions in society. According to Carroll Quigley, the key to the plan, Chad, and here's where it gets crazy fascinating. The key to the plan was one of the principles of the Frankfurt School. They called it enforced coercive toleration, which was originally developed by Herbert Marcuse, who mentored Angela Davis, who mentored the co-founders of BLM Incorporated. Wow. And Davis also mentored the author of the 1619 Project, Nicole Hannah Jones. And the idea behind enforced coercive toleration is this, Chad. And this was what the radical leftists in the 60s didn't really want Carroll Quigley exposing too early, is that you pose as the benefactors of the people. So you use mercy or the appearance of mercy as a mechanism to win the hearts of the people. And Stalin's henchman, Vladimir Karchov, did this in 1923 and 1924 in Soviet Russia when he imposed a comprehensive ban on all charitable activities. So food banks, counseling services, all of these things had to be taken over by the state because the state can tolerate no rivals for the hearts of the people. But Karchov got that idea from Gramsci. Gramsci got that idea from Luke the Apostle. Listen, Vladimir Karchov and Stalin had studied for the priesthood. They knew the stories of the Bible before they abandoned Christianity for radical Bolshevism. They had studied the Gospels, Chad. They would have read Luke 22. And what I'm about to tell you before I land the plane on my soapbox here, brother, is why this is important. Is they took our strategy, Chad. They took the strategy of Christianity and they used it for radical leftism. They co-opted a biblical principle because Satan cannot create. He can only invert, pervert, and copycat. This strategy comes from Luke 22. The strategy of what? Of enforced coercive toleration. But they flipped it upside down. They said, we're going to pretend to be the benefactors of the people, pretend to use mercy to win the hearts of the people so we can then screw them and accumulate more power. In Luke 22, Jesus says, he said, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them. They lord it over the people. And those in authority over them call themselves benefactors.
Yeah.
But Jesus says, but not so with you. He says, rather, let the greatest among you be the one who serves, and the youngest become as the youngest, and the leader is the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who reclines at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at the table? But Jesus says, but I came among you as the one who serves. That is how the strategy of the robes was able to succeed, Chad. The kings of the Gentiles lord it over the people. It's a word that means they tyrannize the people. It's because they pose as the benefactors. They're the ones who write the stimulus checks. They're the ones who, if you're on Medicaid, make sure you get your free COVID shot. They're the ones who take care of you in times of crisis. And Chad, there's always got to be a crisis. You've always got to create a crisis in order to create that ongoing dependency. It's like an abusive relationship. You create fear and dependency simultaneously. Fear and dependency simultaneously. And through the use of this abusive benefactor pose, the control is exercised. But Jesus said that's not the way it's supposed to be for you, church. Don't play that game. You actually serve. You actually care. You actually exercise mercy. And as we know from the history of the church, Chad, every great advance and every great revival is preceded by two things: intense prayerfulness and care for the hurting, the needy, the despised, the rejected, the unloved, and the unlovely. They took our strategy and commandment and flipped it upside down for wickedness. They co-opted and stole a biblical strategy, and they've been using the commandment of Jesus to accomplish more wickedness than the church in America is willing to use today to accomplish righteousness. That then leads to BLM, who were mentored by all of the founders of the people who came up with this idea of enforced coercive toleration to pretend to be the benefactors of the people. That leads to secular discipleship from Herbert Marcuse, Frankfurt School, Antonio Gramsci, Angela Davis, co-founders of BLM, Nicole Hannah-Jones, 1619 Project, in the fall of 2019, America's Systemically Racist, Defund the Police, Burn Down Police Stations, George Floyd, racism is the only explanation for George Floyd, and if you say maybe there's another explanation, that's proof that you're a racist. And so shut up, post a black square, white people shut up, silence is violence, burn down BLM, burn down Ferguson, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Los Angeles, Hollywood, Austin, Texas, Washington, D.C., shut up, everything's racist. And then, because the revolution always eats their own, that summer of 2020, the disciples of the 1619 Project, along with BLM Incorporated, canceled Margaret Sanger. That July of 2020, they said, right after canceling the syrup lady, Aunt Jemima, right after Aunt Jemima, and I couldn't put that delicious cheap syrup on my pancakes, Chad. Right after that, no, seriously, right after that, the timeline is hilarious. They approached Planned Parenthood and said, Planned Parenthood, your founder, Margaret Sanger, she was a racist and a eugenicist. And I'm sitting here like popcorn, lots of butter, extra large Dr. Pepper. I'm like, I'm here for the revolution eating its own. This is hilarious because this is not pro-lifers attacking Planned Parenthood. This is pro-abortion people who already love abortion and they're attacking each other. Yeah. And then the director of Planned Parenthood of Greater New York, Karen Seltzer, the most hilarious name for a radical leftist. Karen Seltzer, like a light alcoholic drink. Karen. She comes out and says, we're done making excuses for our founder and the damage that she did to communities of color. They took her name off of their Manhattan Planned Parenthood clinic. New York City took her name off of the Margaret Sanger Square, as if removing a street sign and renaming a building will make all their bad things go away. If they're willing to lie to you about their patron saint, what else are they lying to you about? And what's the hidden history behind Planned Parenthood, which is the history of cultural Marxism, which is the history of the sexual revolution, which is the history of enforced coercive toleration? What have you been trying to hide from us? And why did you give the Margaret Sanger Award to Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi? And Kamala Harris was trying really hard to get the Margaret Sanger Award. Why did the Smithsonian remove the bust of Sanger's face from their museum? What is going on here? You defended her for 100 years. And then because the disciples of the Frankfurt School through BLM attacked you in the summer of 2020 for the first time in 110 years. You acknowledged that she was indeed a racist and a eugenicist. I'm so confused here. That's why I wrote the book and made the film, The 1916 Project. If you want the answers to all the questions that I just posed and you're a little bit curious that maybe you've been lied to by a lot of things, go to 1916 Project Film, our X account right now to watch the film sweeping the nation, hopefully swinging the election, and waking you up to what's been hidden from you for decades and decades and decades of what was fundamentally spiritual warfare. And Chad, we're waking up the church to take her place back on the wall.
I love it. You and I, Seth, are going to give an account before God for all the words we use, and we use a lot of them, and I like it. But you know what? This is the I joke about it all the time and say we're going to use this episode to fix all the world's problems, and I think this is one of those where we can, because again, it leads to a couple of different things. You know, just in light of what you said, I will remind everybody that although they removed Sanger's name from that Manhattan clinic, which was the one she founded. Yep. They said, we're not going to apologize. We're going to remove it, but we're not going to apologize.
They did.
Which was interesting. But again, it gets back, talking about the benefactors, I would like to throw under the bus the 501c3 benefactors of the church who have lost and watered down their convictions and taken away the truth, because they too have embraced the world's and not the kingdom of God's system of doing things. Amen. From bottom up servanthood higher to they're top down. And so they're just as bad as anybody else out there in this regard. But the fact that, and to use our friend Allie Beth Stuckey's new book titled Toxic Empathy, this is what they have weaponized. This sense, as you said, this enforced
benefactor
toleration.
pose.
Yes, exactly. So, and she deals with these racial, social issues in the book as well. Man, I'll tell you what.
Allie's great.
She is great, and this is the thing, man. This is where we are. This is, and again, let's be unburdened by what has been. I mean, that is a Marxist philosophy that as you alluded to earlier, this is what Kamala Harris can't get out of her mouth. She said it over and over again.
I know.
And let's remember this toxic empathy or this enforced tolerance. This is the wife of Tim Walz, who says, during that summer of love, we raised our windows so we could smell the burning rubber in Minneapolis.
My gosh, that's right.
You remember that? Because we wanted to sense the oppression. We wanted to feel. I mean, that's a bunch of BS right there. That right there is summarizing. That's putting flesh on the bones of exactly what Seth has just described here.
This is a strategy of today's Democrat Party. It's not just Planned Parenthood. Everything you just let me so graciously run my mouth on my soapbox.
Love it.
You're so kind. Is not just the way Planned Parenthood and the radical left engages in the culture war. It's how today's Democrat Party does as well. It's a benefactor pose. It's fake compassion. It's pathological compassion. They want gentle, meek, and mild Jesus, right? But if I remember studying the Bible, Chad, it says, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." But the Greek word for meek is praiotes. And it's best translated as strength under control. Mm-hmm. Strength under control. In ancient Greece, the war horses were trained to be praus, meaning they were strong and powerful, but also under control and willing to submit. The way Jordan Peterson says it is, you should be a monster and then learn to control that fire. And so the war horses were trained to be praus, which is then translated to prautes, which is the Greek word for meek, when it says in Matthew 5:5, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Who will inherit the earth? Godly, righteously indignant men with fire and strength in their belly, but able to control it and use it when it's appropriate for the kingdom of God. That's what we need in the church today. That's who we need in the culture war today. And we're just starting to scratch the surface today on your show for a film you can watch right now at the1916project.com on X. Share it to your radical leftist friends. Share it to your friends straddling the fence, because those people are willing to listen and change their hearts. By the way, I think it was Cicero who said, "Straddle the fence, take Picket in the groin." I forget who said that, but I do know that Satan owns the fence. I do know that. And the world is not cleanly separated, Chad, between radical pro-life activists and radical Moloch worshipers. There's a bunch of people in the squishy middle who like to straddle the fence, and they're still persuadable. They're willing to listen to things like what we're talking about. And our film is a beautifully done project. It's a 75-minute full-length documentary. The book goes even deeper. The book goes way deeper with everything I wanted to put in the film, but didn't have time or space to put into it. Brother, we're just so grateful for you, for your voice, and thank you for letting me share my heart today.
Seth, you're awesome. And I want to encourage everybody listening or watching, don't just do what I did. I was sitting there in a Memphis parking lot of a Hampton Inn hotel, And I immediately after that radio interview, I downloaded the digital copy of 1916 and read it right here on this phone. But then I made sure to order actual copies of it, because with a digital release, they can delete that. That is a modern day 21st century book burning. We don't want that to happen. Make sure you get the hard copies so you don't wind up with only 2 copies of a volume left. Get the copies of the book.
And give it to your friends. Yeah.
Give it to everybody. And Seth, you did a fantastic job. White Rose Resistance, dude, you got my full support there. I want to be a part of anything you're doing anytime. I'm going to get off of this right now. You got
to tell me who to email, because I got to book you for thelaststand.com.
Me, you hang on a second. I'm going to give you a cell phone. I'm going to give you blood type. I'm going to give you all kind of stuff here. And we're going to set up the Seth Gruber wing in my mansion here. And you could anytime.
I'll bring the cigars.
Yeah, there you go. And I'll tell you, I want everybody to do exactly what I'm going to do. As soon as you're done listening to or watching this, I want you to jump over onto X, and I want you to share the 1916 Project. I want you to share it. I want you to tag Tucker, tag Elon, tag, I don't know, whoever. But just keep sharing it. And I would encourage you guys from now until, November 5th, share it every day. Share it every single day. It's that important. It's that big of an issue. Seth, you're awesome. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Chad. Yeah, you're incredible. I so appreciate you.
We're going to do some more stuff together. We're going to talk, and I could sit and listen to you all day long, but you got books to push, man. So I'm going to let you go. But
thanks for letting me rattle.
Yeah, absolutely. For the rest of you guys, go to watchchad.com. That is my very vain name of my website, watchchad.com. It sounds like an OnlyFans, but it's boring. But there's a lot of fun stuff over there. And again, you need to follow Seth over on X and on all of the socials. Get over there. If you search Seth Gruber, you will find him. I promise you will find him. And follow him, keep up with him and everything that he's doing. But please, check out the 1916 Project. Get the book, read it. We have scratched the surface. And I know that this has tickled the underbelly of my listeners. They're curious right now. Do a little extra research about a little 5-foot guy named Antonio Gramsci who died a horrible death in prison because he crossed the path in the wrong way of Benito Mussolini, but then how those things carried over into today. The Marxistas, the Rutherford Institute, Sanger. There's so many of these names out there. The Strategy of the Robes. Do your own research, folks. But the beauty is that Seth's already done the research, and so you just read his book. You read his book, and you'll be wildly conversant at the Thanksgiving dinner table this year, and you'll piss them off. You'll piss people off, but you'll win the argument, and that's the way I like for my Thanksgiving. That's the way I like for it to be. All right. So on behalf of Seth Gruber and everything he's doing, for the rest of you guys, subscribe, tell people, share it, push this episode out there, do all the things you know to do, leave us a review. And I appreciate you guys so much for being listeners, for being supporters of the Chad Prather Show. And we're going to see you next time. We love you. God bless you. Talk to you then.